For insight on what worked and what didn't for the various political parties, let's speak now with Prerna Singh. She is the Mahatma Gandhi Associate Professor of Political Science and International Studies at Brown University. Professor, many expected the BJP to win in a landslide victory. That did not happen. They failed to secure an outright majority, and now the opposition has made some surprise gains. First off, your reaction to the results. How significantly has India's political landscape shifted?
So thank you for having me. It is definitely a very important moment, a very important day for India to just begin waking to, because as you have alluded, the ruling regime's claim, desire, ambition to get more than 400 seats in a 500 plus legislature has not come to be. Instead, as you pointed out, a very sobering results for the leader as well as for the ruling regime, and important gains for the opposition. So in many ways, a testament to the Indian voter, a sign of how wrong exit polls can be, and I think an important signal for a puncturing of the politics of hubris on the one hand and the politics of hate and Hindutva on the other.
Prof. Singh, we know Mr. Modi will now need the support of his coalition partners to form the next government, and presumably these partners are going to make demands, whether it's for portfolios or for policy-making influence. In what ways might they force Modi to make adjustments to his agenda?
It's a very good question, and as we have already acknowledged, it's going to be a very different era from the one that we have seen at least for the last 5 years, in which the BJP did have an absolute majority and was not hemmed in by alliance partners. And so in many ways, this is the shift to what had already been the norm before the rise of Prime Minister Modi, and that is a return to coalition partners, a return to alliance politics. And so here, first of all, it is important to note the alliance politics that the opposition has played quite successfully in this election in terms of the gains that they have made. And the fact that the ruling regime will also now have to return to these alliance partners. I think, as I alluded, the politics of hubris, which have taken two main forms in the last 5 years, which is a centralization and a cult of personality. I can imagine that we would see a dilution of both of these trends in terms of the personalization of politics and also the concentration of politics in New Delhi at the cost of the states, because at least two of the major coalition partners that Mr. Modi will now have to rely on are from subnational parties, in particular an important party in the south, in the state of Andhra Pradesh. I've written a lot in my work on the politics of subnationalism. And so we will see regional politics begin to play a more important role at the national level. On the other hand, in addition to this kind of dissipating of the politics of hubris, of centralization, and a kind of cult of personality politics, we will also probably see a dilution of the politics of Hindutva and hate. In this present election, the highest leader really plumped to some low depths in terms of the Islamophobic campaigning that occurred. And the fact that the regime has not just suffered losses, but suffered important losses in the city of Ayodhya, which is part of the constituency of Faizabad, where the BJP has been ejected, as well as a loss in Banswara, which was the site of perhaps the most vitriolic and vicious Islamophobic speech. The fact that the losses have occurred in these places, as well as in the bellwether state of Uttar Pradesh in north central India, that has been governed at the regional level by a chief minister who claims to be in many ways a godman, and Yogi Adityanath. Those, I think, are important signals for the dilution of the politics of hubris, of Hindutva, of hate, and an importance of coalition partners, including from the region, from subnational parties.
Professor, I want to ask you about the stability of this coalition, though. Mr. Modi mentioned two parties specifically, the TDP and the JDU. Not exactly reliable, as we know. Will they stick around and ensure that, the coalition will last at least for the next 5 years?
I think that is exactly the question, and it is certainly the case that today the ruling regime with these partners does have a majority to be able to form the government, but definitely the stability of the regime, and in many ways its ability also to be able to deliver what the voters of India, particularly in the countryside, have signaled that they find important, which is not so much this identity politics, but a politics of livelihood, a politics of employment, a politics of public goods provision, and not. It's important to keep in mind the context of farmers' protests that roiled India exactly on these livelihood issues. And so, in many ways, this question of whether they will be able to deliver while being in coalition remains an outstanding question. And also just to keep in mind that, the election that has been won, the gains that have been made by the opposition have really happened on a playing field that many commentators have pointed out is not a level playing field. And so people have pointed to these three M's: muscle, money, and media, which really stacked the playing field against the opposition. The muscle being the fact that opposition leaders have been imprisoned, their assets frozen, their assets confiscated, people have been intimidated and coerced out of standing for elections. There have been allegations of electoral mismanagement. And so this has been the muscle. The money has been the disproportionate control of resources by the present regime for election purposes. And then finally, a control of the media. And so the fact that the opposition has been able to make these gains in many ways with their hands and feet tied at the back also is a testament to their power. So as we look towards the longevity and stability of this new coalition regime, I think we also have to keep in mind that this is an opposition and an electorate that has displayed a lot of resilience, a lot of democratic resilience in the face of authoritarian and democratic backsliding.
Professor, Mr. Modi lost the constituency home to the Ram Temple in Ayodhya, a temple that was a centerpiece of the BJP campaign. Can you tell us what happened there? What does the loss tell us about how voters feel about Mr. Modi's Hindu nationalist agenda?
I think this has been a very significant loss. I think, as you have rightly alluded, the symbolic power of a loss in a city, in really against the backdrop of this gigantic Hindu temple that was constructed, inaugurated in haste in a glitzy ceremony that you covered just a few months ago, and which in many ways really kick-started the election campaign for the present regime. The fact that the loss has happened in this constituency, but also keep in mind, this constituency is located in India's most populous state, the state of Uttar Pradesh, has a larger population than Russia, sends the largest number of legislators to India's parliament, and has historically, since independence, been a bellwether state that has been under the control of the BJP. For the last few years, it is a state in which at the legislative, the state government level, it is still controlled by the BJP. The fact that the loss has happened in the constituency with the temple, that it has happened in this particular state, is a very important symbolic loss. And I think a signal to the fact that this politics of Islamophobia, of anti-Muslim rhetoric, which, as I noted, has really reached a fever vitriolic pitch in this campaign, and a dialing back of this politics of Hindutva and the politics of hate and identity politics, and a rearrangement of the focus towards questions of livelihood, but also towards the Constitution. The Constitution has emerged as an unexpected and important lightning rod, a rallying force for the Indian electorate, especially in the countryside. And that has been a remarkable move in which people have been saying in the countryside that this is not about identity politics, this is about employment, about jobs, about livelihood, and also about securing India's constitution, its secular democratic foundations that were laid in the wake of the anti-colonial nationalist movement in 1947. So a very different set of issues than the politics that was symbolized by the building and the inauguration of the temple in Ayodhya.
Professor, simple question for me. Is the opposition back, and will this mean a more consultative form of governance ahead?
A great question. I think it's important, even as we take note of the sobering losses for the present regime, to not ignore the fact that it has made important inroads, had very important victories. It has taken over, for instance, the state of Delhi, the national capital. It has won all seats there. It has also made important inroads into the south, a very strong showing for the present government in the state of Karnataka, in the state of Telangana, in Andhra Pradesh, of course, the coalition partner that you mentioned, the TDP, but also has inaugurated its count of seats in Kerala, a state that has historically had a very important place for the communist movement, has always had Congress or communist governments, a state that I've studied, where the BJP has really made an important inroad in terms of vote share as well as in the state of Tamil Nadu. So really a kind of BJP showing unprecedented strength in the deep south. So it's important not to ignore that as we do take account also of important victories for an opposition that has, as I said, not just been weak and disorganized, but also really not played this election on a level playing field, and which exit polls had predicted as being entirely, a mess and have had a very poor showing. In contrast to the exit polls has had a stronger showing, but I think it's important to also take note of important victories for the BJP, and certainly a new era, a different era from the one that the BJP would have wanted and which many pollsters were thinking India would be waking up to this morning.
Much has been said about Modi magic, the Prime Minister's charisma, his ability to maintain, grow his popularity over his decade in power. Professor, do these results suggest that Modi's appeal may have peaked?
I think there is certainly a way in which political commentators in India are reading it this way. I think it is not. I don't think it's an incorrect analysis. As I pointed out, this election was really fought on a cult of personality, a politics of hubris. The ruling regime had come in saying that they were looking for more than 400 seats in a legislature with over 500 seats. So that would have been a really resounding majority. And in many ways, this claim was staked on the back of the cult of personality of the Prime Minister. There has been note of the fact that India, a still parliamentary system, has been moving towards more of a kind of presidential type of personalized politics, both in terms of the symbol of the Prime Minister, but also this centralization of power in Delhi. And so in many ways, both this cult of personality, the fighting of elections on the basis less of a party agenda and a party manifesto and more towards an individual, and for this to be a referenda or a vote on a person as it is in a presidential system, I think there has been a way in which we can read the present election results as the Indian elector voting against that. Instead, the India bloc has really been from the ground up a study, an unprecedented showing of coalitional strength. Leaders that have historically not seen eye to eye have shared a podium. I think in as much as we think about the longevity of the alliance that the ruling party now finds itself in, it's also important to keep in mind about the longevity and the strength and resilience of the India bloc that, of course, has fought on a coalition platform. But, leaders have come together, but also party workers, especially in this bellwether state of UP that has flipped away from the regime, have worked hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder. And so there has been on both sides a kind of re-emergence of coalitional politics. And I think that is an important development for Indian politics and a very different era from that of the last 5 years.
A fascinating election to watch. We really appreciate your deep insights as we make sense of the results today. Associate Professor Prerna Singh from Brown University, thank you.